Visitors to the gallery often ask me, sometimes by way of polite conversation, but sometimes from very genuine interest, which is your favourite picture? And generally speaking, I'm stumped, because I have a number of very favourites of Watts's work. But I have to say that this one, Two Corpses Floating in Hell, comes very near the top of my list of favourites. The subject matter really doesn't matter in the least. It's the pictorial aspect of it. And Watts himself would never part with it. Its official title is Paolo and Francesca, Francesca da Rimini, which was a subject that fascinated the Victorians, particularly during the medieval revival in the 19th century. And after all, it is the perfect little bedtime story when you think of it. It encapsulates ambition, greed, duplicity, adultery, and murder, all wrapped up in one neat little tale. And it's a perfect example also of one of Watts's favourite compositional techniques. He was much taken by the theory of the linear curve, which is that a straight line is in fact a series of minute opposite curves. And he very often builds up what become his finest compositions on a series of curves. And you can see so well in this picture how Paolo himself makes a wonderful curve through almost the entire canvas. And Francesca echoes it this way, and then it's linked across the center by their joined hands and arms. It's a wonderful example of harmony in design, and also in the coloring. Watts was exceptionally good with grey. On the face of it, not a very exciting color, but he uses it always to great effect. Everybody probably knows the story behind the subject, but we might just cover it briefly, inasmuch as young Francesca was determined to have a social position and some funds, and so she married the old Duke Malatesta, and it wasn't long before she realized that his younger brother Paolo might have, in several respects, have been a better bet. And she and her young brother-in-law got very, very friendly, and they used to read poetry to one another. And the time came when the Duke was obliged to go away on some sort of business trip, and he came back a little earlier than expected. It is curious how history goes on repeating itself. The world doesn't change. He came back a little earlier than expected and found his young wife and his young brother in what used to be called a compromising situation, and was, to say the least, a little miffed about it, and murdered both of them. And being the Duke, of course, got away with it. And being a pair of adulterers, they were condemned to the adulterers' circle of hell, where Dante encountered them and swooned away when he was told the full story and the tragedy of it. But because they truly loved one another, they were allowed to stay together. And they're invariably shown swirling forever in the hot winds of hell, clasped in one another's arms. And many, many painters have painted the subject, but very few, if any, I think, have brought it off as well as Watts. He painted the subject 4 times over a period of 40 years, beginning when he was in Italy in the 1840s. And this final version, he would not part with. He was offered at one stage 30,000 guineas for it, but he said, no, I'm sorry, it's not for sale. And he could not bring himself to part with it because he felt that in all his work, he'd come in this picture as near as he ever did to what he was trying to achieve technically. I think he probably did that, and he did so much more. And the fact that it's two corpses floating in hell doesn't really matter.